pawn to d4 played by Pragg. And Fabi goes pawn to d5. Symmetrical. Pawn comes up to c4. We have the queen's gambit. And Caruana plays c6. The Slav defense. This is, I think, the first time we are seeing Slav happen. We have seen semi-Slav, but that has been through the e6 move order. But c6, knight to f6. Very interesting to see what Fabi has up his sleeve here. Pragg goes knight to c3 after a bit of a think. And now the main move here, I mean, you can go e6 to get into semi-Slav territory, but he goes and he keeps it in the pure Slav territory by taking on c4. Pragg plays a4, stopping the pawn from coming to b5, and now bishop to f5 blade, controlling the e4 square. He goes knight to e5. That's the other main move. The other move is e3 here. And now queen c7, a slightly offbeat move, because generally the main line is knight d7, knight c4, queen c7, and then trying for e5. So maybe queen c7, knight c4, he wants to transpose it back to knight d7, which is what I'm pretty much think Fabi will do. But he goes knight a6, and this is a very offbeat move. Pragg, who was at 149, took 7 minutes to make this move f3, which is very logical. He wants to expand in the center with e4. Rook d8 played, hitting the pawn on d4. And now pawn to e4, just gaining space in the center of the board. The bishop has to move, bishop e6, and now one of the threats is take, and play e5, which is the reason why Pragg moves his knight away once again to e5. And Fabi goes knight b4, bringing the knight into the game, also threatening threats like takes, and knight c2 check. So bishop e3 defending the pawn, and now defending the knight on b4 with a5. White can put the bishop on c4 now. This is what Pragg does. I mean, there are other moves. Bishop e2 was better, maybe queen d2, maybe knight d3, but bishop c4 is interesting. He goes back knight d7. Very interesting move. Fabi is in his preparation. By the way, there was also an interesting queen sack line like this. But knight d7, he takes on e6. Of course, taking here is blunderous. f4 and white is winning. But knight e5, and now this bishop does not have a good square because knight d3 check is threatened. So he goes castles here, Pragg. And he's figured all of this out on the board by taking 56 minutes, f e6. And now you simply pop the bishop out to f4, pinning the knight. So bishop f4. Fabi goes knight to d3. And now the queen takes on d3. So you get back your piece. Knight takes d3. Bishop to c7. But black gets an extra pawn here with rook takes on d4. And so black is a pawn up. White has to think what to do here. Goes rook d1, pinning the knight on d3, attacking the rook here. The rook comes back. Now, the pawn on b2 is never really very appetizing because you can always take on d7 and then rook b1 and pick up b7. So Pragg takes the pawn on a5 first. And Fabi very quickly plays g6. It could be that he's still in his prep after 19 moves. What an incredible piece of preparation, for sure. Knight e2 by Pragg. And I think somewhere Pragg has recognized that this position isn't particularly great for him. And that he must start trying to pull the brakes. With bishop c3, Fabi now takes on c3. Pragg takes back with the knight. And he goes king f7 to bring the rook into the game. Pragg pushes his pawn to a5. He's trying to create some kind of weakness with a6 takes, rook a6. On one hand, Pragg does have a better structure, but on the other hand, black's pieces are just so active. a6 takes here. Rook takes on a6. And rook d6 played. Pragg pushes his pawn to h4, and now maybe you can take this pawn on b2, but Fabi would like to do it this way, because if you played knight b2, I have rook d6 and e5, and later I'll pick up the c6 pawn. So rook b8, rook comes to d2. And Fabi is still waiting. You know, here taking this, it's the same thing. Take and e5, which is the reason why he's just waiting here. Plays pawn to h6. Knight comes to d1. Maybe he wants to slowly bring his king up. We play knight f2. He goes g5. And h5 played, fixing the weakness on h6. The knight jumps back to e5. Rook takes rook. It takes back with the pawn. And now black's structure has improved. Pragg gives a check. King f8, and I think going after this pawn would be a mistake, as knight f7 traps the rook, so that would not be a good idea. King f1 first. Fabi goes pawn to d5, takes on d5, takes here cd, and Pragg attacks the pawn on e6. You can defend it, king e7, and now another check on a7. I think the players are repeating the moves here. I doubt if Fabi wants to take risks by going upwards. He goes king f8. He can go king f6, rook h7. Maybe it's possible, but he just simply keeps it king f8, rook a6, king e7, check. King f8. And now Pragg is taking a call. It's a tough moment for all the players at the candidates, with Sindarov playing so well and every game being so tough. You want to win. You want to catch up with him. But on the other hand, you know the limitations of the position. You also know that draw seems the most likely thing to do. Fabi calls the arbiter and says it's a threefold repetition. They shake